Hi, I'm Queenie Yu with Bullet Point News. Joining me is René De Vries, our environmental correspondent, who is a seasoned environmental geoscientist. René, welcome.
Hi, Queenie. Good to be here.
Nice to have you, René. Could you tell us about excess fill management and why it's important?
Yeah, you know what? That has been a very important thing actually for City of Toronto for the longest time. As the City of Toronto expanded and people were developing properties, they would dig up soil to install a basement, let's say, or to install a parking garage, and that soil had to go somewhere. Now, as time went on, they would fill areas such as the Leslie Spit. And when environmental concerns became prevalent about the quality of that fill, they started looking for other locations, and Stouffville became one of those locations where a lot of Toronto fill found its home. And so many of the gravel pits around Stouffville have been filled up with fill that came from Toronto. Now, over time, and I would say that started 35 years ago. That's just when I entered the business as a professional. There were regulations that came into play with respect to the quality of that fill, and then also companies had to start testing the material. So the soil would be tested for its quality, for the chemicals in it, and for if it would meet government standards. So in that sense, that whole industry has really developed over time. In fact, more, I would say, if you want to generally describe how that has developed, it's become more stringent, more testing requirements, more paperwork, more qualifications, and more cost also for developers to actually do what's right and do what meets the requirements. So it's become a big issue for many site locations to develop at this point. In order to get rid of clean fill from City of Toronto, they wind up shipping it 2-3 hours north. And Stouffville is still one of those locations where they bring it to. But now a lot of testing needs to take place before a receiver will actually receive that material. So that's where professionals like us come in to do that work.
What are the impacts on the environment by accepting this fill into Stouffville?
Um, what we don't want is that there's contaminants in that fill. We want to make sure that it's clean, right? Because if it's not clean and there's contaminants in it, could be salt, could be industrial chemicals, or something that petroleum is one of those contaminants that could land in that fill. Over time, that soil and the rainwater that comes in onto that fill, if it's deposited in an area that's not further controlled or monitored, will drain out, and the leachate from that what is supposed to be clean fill then starts to affect groundwater quality in the area of the fill deposit. So that's been historically the biggest reason why the fill is being tested. Now, there's other reasons, just the contour of the land. You want to make sure that your drainage is done right. Yeah, if you deposit, for example, you deposit a fill on one location, you get one big hump of soil there. Now, rainwater that will run off, not infiltrate in the soil, but run off, can start to affect neighboring property. So that in itself is also a concern that needs to be taken into account. And so those are two things: the hydrology and surface runoff, and the hydrogeology and the quality of the material that might affect the quality of the groundwater that seeps out of that fill.
How does Stouffville benefit by accepting this fill from other cities?
There's a slight monetary component to it. Over time, the city of or the town of Stouffville started charging for this material because they had cost also that came into play, or managing that. The engineering department had to oversee paperwork. They would have to say accept materials. So there's a benefit that way. Um, yeah. What else? I think the benefit was mostly for the commercial operators that brought in this material. There was big money in there over time. If they brought in large volumes, there could be some money to be made if you had sufficient space for the Toronto developers. So, and on the other hand, if you have a gravel pit that has had been excavated and depleted, and you need to meet Ministry of Natural Resources requirements with respect to rehabilitation, they needed some fill to bring that back to back to those requirements. And so that's another benefit, just to renaturalize the landscape, so to speak, for any gravel pit that was abandoned.
There are a number of developments happening in Stouffville. Where does that fill go?
Mostly people will try not to move it if they don't have to. The if and that's why you see these big humps of soil next to development locations, and they'll place it there. If they can reuse it, they'll reuse it. If they at the end of the property development have some surplus soil, they'll move it off the property. Ideally, if that's all topsoil, they'll just reuse the topsoil elsewhere. If there's large other volumes that are generated, and there is a contamination in that soil, and that will be determined through testing by engineering firms, then they have to dispose of it as a waste, and the waste costs money. We're talking $40 a ton usually, so that quickly adds up. We're probably talking $1,500 a truckload. So really, that only happens if there's a lot, if there's a significant quantity of contamination in that soil, and that can happen sometimes when the land was industrially used. Here on Main Street in Stouffville, I've been involved with a few locations where I know there was contaminated soil, and that gets removed and hauled to a landfill. When the property is redeveloped into residential land use from commercial, for example, the gas station, the Canadian Tire gas station that was on just west of Ninth Line on Main Street, we now see a high-rise building going up there. Um, yeah, it's likely that they had some soil coming out of there. May have been some contamination because it was a gas station. At that point, that material goes to a landfill and registered landfill. So that's uh, uh, that's then just a cost for the development. I wanted to mention one. United Soils is an important soil receiver in Stouffville. That's just north of Ninth Line and northeast of Bloomington. They've been operating there forever. Actually, I don't know why. Maybe because I work in this industry, but I've visited in my history, three of the receiver sites so far of clean fill, and United Soil was one of them. Sometimes it's a client that wants to just do an audit and see, okay, well, how is this site operated? So I'm familiar with all these sites. It's kind of interesting to have that knowledge and apply it. So
You're going to run some workshops with the town staff. What are some of the topics you're going to cover?
yeah, that's something that's slated for next week. Actually, we're just talking about the details. Usually the town staff, they're familiar with the bylaws that have been developed. In fact, Stouffville has historically taking a lead in that, also applying and dealing with the bylaws because of the large volume of material that was making its way into Stouffville. They wanted to make sure, does it meet provincial standards and reuse standards and standards for excess soil? What are the procedures that apply? There's paperwork requirements, filing of paperwork requirements, and that's especially when new staff comes in, they want to become familiar with those requirements. There's new regulations that apply for excess soil management. They want to talk about that. Then there's issues such as, what do we do with asphalt shavings, or what are the testing requirements that we should apply to our development locations, and yeah, we talk about those kind of things, and it's more or less bringing new staff up to date with the existing regulations and general engineering practices that would apply to these situations. It's fun to apply that experience, actually, and to talk to people about that, yeah.
Great.
Preserve the environment, right? Because yeah, we do protect. I'm concerned also about if that is not regulated. And before, I would say, the late '80s, when this became an important topic, unregulated dumping of waste took place and has affected certain locations. Also in Stouffville, it's the infamous location there of Highway 48 in Bloomington, the northeast corner. Yeah, there were concerns. You can look that up on Wikipedia. There's even an entry, I believe, related to fill quality concerns and waste deposits and so on. And then once that gets bad enough and it starts affecting offsite properties, yeah, then it's and offsite water wells, for example, yeah, then it becomes a big concern.
René, thank you so much for joining us today at Bullet Point News.